take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, December 8th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. So glad you could join us here today for the 504th episode of the Russ Belville Show, bringing you live, direct, daily news, interviews, data, research, information, opinions, music, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. If you like the show, please let your friends know about it. We're live here every weekday at 3 p.m. with replays at 6 p.m. on 420radio.org. You can also find the on-demand versions of our shows at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/radicalruss. They're also available at 420radio.org. Those of you who are fans of our TuneIn stream on TuneIn Radio, I apologize, that TuneIn stream is down right at the moment, but we are working hard to get that reinstated. We had to move Shoutcast servers, and apparently there's some problem getting all of the servers to talk to each other again. So we'll get that all figured out, and soon enough we will have that stream back online for you. Now, on today's show, we've got a very exciting show because first, as we do every Monday, we're joined by Dr. Mitch Earlywine, who's going to answer your live questions on marijuana, cannabis, science, culture, history, and health. Anything you want to know, cannabis, hemp, marijuana, whatever you like to call it, Dr. Mitch has an answer for you. Today we're going to take a look at some studies that purport to show marijuana is helpful for preventing Alzheimer's, treating anxiety, and preventing depression. So we'll take a look at that at 1:30. You can also call in live at 971-533-7111 or get into our chat room if you'd like to ask Dr. Mitch a live question of your own. Also on the show today, we'll have time for a radical rant called From Legalization to Equalization. We're going to take a look at the hard work that has yet to be done in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and Washington, D.C. with respect to marijuana legalization. We are in the reconstruction phase right now, and it's time to get past Jim Crow and separate but equal and fight for full marijuana equalization. We'll tell you what that means in the radical rant. Also on the show today, we'll have some time for some drug war data mining. It is December, so we're starting our end of 2014 retrospective posts. And today we're going to take a look at the top 5 pro-pot data points of 2014. 4 very, very promising sets of data that show that we have passed the tipping point for marijuana legalization in the United States. Also on the show today, we'll go behind the headlines where we're taking a look at the state of Florida, which narrowly missed passing a medical marijuana constitutional amendment. They needed 60%. They got about 58%, and the man behind that amendment, millionaire attorney John Morgan, has learned some humility in his loss and has some plans on how he will do better in 2016 to help protect the patients he so cares about. We'll talk all about that in Behind the Headlines. But first, we've got our 420 radio news, and in the news today, we've got an acknowledgement from presidential hopeful Senator Rand Paul about his youthful marijuana use. We've got the California Medical Association urging the state to protect the organ transplant rights of medical cannabis patients. We've got a credit union that's forming in Colorado and is just about ready to begin opening its doors to service the banking needs of the Colorado marijuana industry. We've got news from the Centers for Disease Control, which show that the teen use and availability of marijuana went up in the states that kept it most criminalized, and CNBC is pioneering a new cannabis reality show to compete with CNN and MSNBC. We'll tell you all about it in the 420 Radio News coming up right after this first break. And then stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls and continue discussing the news of the day. 420 Radio News is next. I'm Radical Russ. We're back right after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the activist radio station.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact Normal at norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
The Jody Emery Show, replaying Fridays at 1 Pacific on 420radio.org. 5 of the last 9 major party candidates to run for president, 3 of the last 9 vice presidential candidates, and the last 3 two-term presidents have all smoked pot. Marijuana, the gateway drug to the White House. This is the Russ Belville Show. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is your 420 Radio News for Monday, December 8th, 2014. 4 years after deflecting questions whether he smoked marijuana while in college, Kentucky Senator and 2016 presidential hopeful Rand Paul appears to acknowledge his own marijuana use. Quote, "Let's just say I wasn't a choir boy when I was in college," end quote, Paul replied when asked whether he smoked marijuana while in college. Continuing, quote, "And I recognize that kids make mistakes, and I can say that I made mistakes when I was a kid," end quote. Paul, however, is not calling for marijuana to be decriminalized. He is striking a balance on the issue and does not want to be seen as an advocate for the use of marijuana. Quote, "If your kid was caught selling marijuana or growing enough that it's a felony conviction, they could be in jail for an extended period of time. They also lose their ability to be employable," Paul explained. "So I want to change all of that. I want to lessen the criminal penalties on it," end quote. The California Medical Association, or CMA, House of Delegates in San Diego voted Saturday on Resolution 116-14 to urge transplant clinics in the state against removing patients from organ transplant lists simply because they were recommended cannabis by a physician. 1 in 20 California adults have used medical cannabis for serious conditions, and denying transplants to patients who do so is common in the state at hospitals like Cedars-Sinai, University of California, Los Angeles, University of California, San Francisco, and Stanford Medical School, reports indicate. Advocacy group Americans for Safe Access said Californians who lawfully use cannabis are dying from denied transplants. Patients on transplant lists are drug tested while waiting for an organ and often learn only after they've been denied an organ that testing positive for or reporting marijuana use disqualified them. The CMA resolution comes as the California legislature considers introducing a bill to block transplant clinics from rejecting patients based on their medical marijuana use. A new credit union aimed specifically toward the cannabis industry would help move Colorado's pot industry out of the shadows. The Fourth Corner Credit Union hopes to open its doors within weeks in Denver, offering to accept cash deposits and to permit members to make electronic transfers for payroll and rent and to buy supplies. Colorado's banking regulators granted Fourth Corner a charter on November 19th, and now the union is waiting for the Federal Reserve to issue it a master account number, which would give it access to the country's electronic banking system. The credit union believes that it will get the account number without a fight because the Federal Reserve must give out numbers to organizations that have been granted state charters. Money management concerns have gotten so bad in Colorado that many of the state's largest stores have hired armed security guards to handle their cash. According to the Centers for Disease Control, teenage consumption and the availability of drugs on school grounds went up in states where marijuana remained criminalized. However, in Colorado, consumption went down and availability went down, despite the medical marijuana industry developing in the state during the same period.
According to a recent white paper from the Cato Institute, teenage consumption of marijuana didn't increase in the 16 states that legalized medical marijuana. Recent data also shows that despite legalizing recreational marijuana, teenage consumption of marijuana in Colorado is still falling, decreasing from 39% in 2011 to 37% in 2013. Additionally, after states legalized medical marijuana, suicide rates among men aged 20 to 39 years old decreased compared with those in states where legalization didn't take place. CNN and MSNBC have recently joined the marijuana programming bonanza with Pot Barons of Colorado and High Profits. But the original Pot Network is back with a new show. CNBC's new program, Marijuana Country, The Cannabis Boom, premieres on January 5th at 9 p.m. Eastern. Correspondent Harry Smith returns to Colorado to detail the rise of a new American industry 1 year after the state legalized marijuana. CNBC produced and repeatedly aired Marijuana Inc. and Marijuana USA before weed programming was all the rage. It even updated Marijuana in America with Smith, replacing original reporter Trish Regan, who is now with Bloomberg TV. This isn't a trend that will die down anytime soon. This has been your 420 Radio News for Monday, December 8th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. 420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts.
There's so much I worry about as a mom. Stephen Harper thinks that organized crime should continue to profit from marijuana prohibition. Imagine regulating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes with a strong and clear educational message, making it more difficult for my kids and your kids to access. Drug dealers don't ask for ID. Stephen Harper does not have the kind of judgment we need to protect our children, authorized by the Normal Women's Alliance of Canada.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
The Russ Belville Show reminds you to never smoke and drive impaired. Hang out for a while. Share.
Welcome back, everybody. 13 after the hour, and today in Behind the Headlines, we're taking a look back to the Florida Medical Marijuana Initiative, Amendment 2, that narrowly failed to be added to the Colorado, that'd be amazing, the Florida Constitution. So many states. The Florida Constitution requires that you have a 60% vote to add an amendment, and the amendment for medical marijuana got 57 point something percent, about 58%. So it just narrowly failed making it into the Constitution. And the man behind it was attorney John Morgan. He is a multimillionaire personal injury attorney with law offices throughout the state, based in Orlando, who placed a majority of the money, mostly his money, into the fight for medical marijuana. He put in an estimated, over $4 million in cash and loans to People United for Medical Marijuana. The campaign itself had $7.4 million, so he contributed over $4 million of that. Morgan, when faced with the loss after the election, said, quote, "I'm not used to losing, but I lost. I lost in a very public way. But I also believe when you lose, the greatest gift you get is humility. I think with humility, you can be much more reasoned, much more measured, and you can take failure and turn it into success." End quote. So I am very thrilled about John Morgan coming around on this, because according to this article, it seems like he did learn the right lessons from this medical marijuana loss. The first thing was to not underestimate the opposition. Now, up until the Florida campaign, there had never really been an organized and well-bankrolled opposition campaign to medical marijuana. But Florida was the first time it ever happened, when the Drug-Free Florida Committee spent $6.3 million, much of it on advertising campaigns, to raise doubt about the amendment. That $6.3 million was raised mostly from the $5.5 million that came from one person, Sheldon Adelson, the billionaire Las Vegas casino owner, who is the 12th richest person in America. Also understand that Florida is the home to many pharmaceutical corporations and is also home to, I would say, the anti-marijuana legalization movement. If you're going to pick any state that was the home of the movement, this would be it. It's the home of Project Sam and Kevin Sabet. It's the home of Calvina Fay and the Drug Free America Foundation. It's the home of Mel and Betty Sembler, who were a large part of this anti-campaign in 2014. They were the ones that formed Straight Inc., the teen drug rehab centers that were later sued out of business for torturing and false imprisonment of the kids they were trying to use tough love on. So don't underestimate that there will be, from this point forward, campaigns against medical marijuana, and they could be fairly well bankrolled. The other problem with that is that getting medical marijuana on the ballot in Florida, most of John Morgan's money had to go toward getting the signatures on the petition. Hiring signature gatherers to get the almost 700,000 signatures they needed. This next year, as they come up in 2016, they will already have the information from the signature gatherers. They'll already have a big database to go to, so they won't have to spend quite as much money trying to get it on the ballot. And according to John Morgan, he says he, quote, learned a lot. The big words we learned were loophole, immunity, and children. Those were the three big words they kept coming at us with. Distorted, we think, but nonetheless very effective. The loophole he speaks of is how the Florida Medical Marijuana Amendment was written with a California clause that would allow doctors to recommend medical marijuana for any condition they felt it would be appropriate. The opposition painted that as a big loophole that would allow just about anyone to get medical marijuana, that it would be de facto legalization. They also pointed to what they called a drug dealer loophole, which was that caregivers could be people that had criminal records. So therefore, in their minds, the opposition, you could be a criminal drug dealer and then become a medical marijuana caregiver and use that as a cover for your illegal activities. The immunity part, they were talking about the possibility there'd be immunity to doctors from lawsuits for medical malpractice over their use of, over their recommendation of medical marijuana, which seems odd considering that marijuana is non-toxic and can't cause a fatal overdose. Don't know what you'd be suing over, but Morgan says that's another lesson that they had learned. And he says, quote, I'll make sure they don't get it next time, meaning the opportunity to go after that immunity clause. And the children. What about the children? Another consideration, because the Medical Marijuana Amendment didn't specifically say that children couldn't get medical marijuana without their parents' permission. Even though Florida law makes it so that you can't do any major medical things without a parent's permission, that wasn't explicit in the amendment. Morgan says he's learned his lesson from that and will make it explicit in the amendment next time. And probably the best thing that John Morgan learned, something he could have learned if he just would have listened to Bobby Platshorn and the Silver Tour. And that was that he spent too much time on younger voters, including college students. He says, quote, Morgan says, quote, I spent so much time trying to motivate young people to come out and vote, which they did to a degree, but not like I'd hoped for, noting that the support from voters 65 and older had, quote, dropped through the floor, end quote. Do not make that mistake next time, John Morgan. You've got to get seniors, especially in a place like Florida, on board with medical marijuana. And they should naturally be the group most likely to want to vote for medical marijuana, since there's so much it can do to help them with all of the conditions they have to deal with on a daily basis. Get a hold of Bobby Platshorn, talk to the Silver Tour, and get his advice on how to communicate with seniors on medical marijuana. He's been doing it since 2009. And finally, Morgan says he will not make himself the center of the next tour, the next statewide tour to promote medical marijuana, as he did in 2014, instead deciding to make patients the central focus of the campaign. Wow, what an epiphany. A medical marijuana campaign centered on the patients who could actually benefit from passing medical marijuana. You wouldn't think you'd have to spend $4 million and lose a high-profile campaign to figure that one out. But Morgan says, quote, I don't believe I should be the face of it again. By the way, I'm too old, gray, and fat to go through it again. End quote. All right, folks, it's 4:20 in Denver, Colorado, Mountain Time Zone, celebrating the 420. Let's join them if you got the chance. Sit back with your favorite herb and enjoy yourself for the next few minutes. When we come back, we'll have some drug war data mining on the top 5 pro-pot data points of 2014. .420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. The new Viper Hour every Monday at 5 and 8 Pacific on 420radio.org. Hey tokers and tokettes, Radical Russ here for the Canador, a practical solution to keep herbs from drying. The Canador is the perfect airtight storage system for your fine herbs, from the half-inch thick walnut and cherry wood construction, clear-top perforated jars for storage, and the humidity bead system that keeps your herbs at a perfect 65% relative humidity. I keep all my herbs in the Canador, and you should too. Check out Canador.com for more information. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining. 2014 may be looked back as the year the momentum for nationwide marijuana legalization hit the tipping point. Aside from marijuana becoming legalized in 2 more states, here are 5 sets of data points that seem to confirm that inevitability. Number 1, national marijuana arrests decreased for the 4th year in a row. Not only is it the first time arrests have dropped 4 years in a row, but the total of 693,482 national marijuana arrests in 2013 is the lowest total in 15 years. During Barack Obama's presidency, there has been an overall 18% decline in the annual marijuana arrest total. The number 1 and number 4 greatest one-year declines in annual marijuana arrests have occurred on Obama's watch. Number 2, teen marijuana use in Colorado has dropped in 2 successive surveys. In 2009, the year Colorado's dispensary system began to flourish, the Colorado Healthy Kids Survey said 24.8% of teens said they used marijuana monthly. In 2011, that figure was down to 22%, and by 2013, after a year of legalization, the figure is down to 20%. Compare that with United States figures from 2009, 2011, and 2013, where the teen use of marijuana, both lifetime and monthly, has steadily increased, now overtaking the rates in the legal state of Colorado. The number 3 promising data point is that teenage marijuana use is falling while senior marijuana use has tripled. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, in 2002, there were 3.9 million teenagers aged 12 to 17 using marijuana annually. In 2012, that number had dropped by 500,000. Over that same decade, use by seniors aged 50 plus increased from 1.6 million to 4.7 million, an increase of 3.1 million seniors. This isn't just due to the baby boomer demographic bubble that's aging every statistic, however. That teen annual rate dropped from 15.8% to 13.5%, while the senior rate increased from 2.1% to 4.6%, effectively doubling annual senior use. Among monthly marijuana consumers, teens dropped from 2 million to 1.8 million, and their rate dropped from 8.2% to 7.3%, while seniors increased from less than 1 million to 3.1 million, with a rate increase of 1.2% to 3%. That's right, while the senior annual use rate doubled, the senior monthly use rate tripled. The number 4 promising data point is there is no longer majority support among any demographic for jailing pot smokers, and the overall majority of Americans favors legalization. By age, race, and politics, there is solid support for the idea of decriminalization, that possession of small amounts of marijuana for personal use should not be subject to jail time. According to the Pew Research Center's report, America's New Drug Policy Landscape, more than 3 out of 4 Americans believe in no jail for pot, with 69% of Republicans, 63% of seniors 65 and older, and 60% of Hispanics offering the least support for decrim. Over 4 in 5 of those aged 18 to 29 and aged 50 to 64 support decrim. Meanwhile, there were 9 polls asking about legalization support in 2014, and only 2 came up below 50%. One that was a 48-47 plurality, and another that was a 49-48 plurality. And the poll average in 2014 was 52% support for marijuana legalization nationwide. And finally, the last most telling data point for 2014's tipping point on marijuana is not only do Americans believe marijuana is safer than alcohol, they think it's safer than sugar. According to a Wall Street Journal poll, Americans find marijuana less harmful than sugar. Given a choice of 4 popular substances, tobacco was listed by almost half of the respondents, or 49%, as the most harmful, followed by alcohol in second place with 24%, and sugar in third place with 15%. Marijuana was considered the least harmful, with just 8% of respondents ranking it the most harmful substance. And speaking of sugar, 3 studies now have shown that marijuana consumers are at less risk for diabetes and have lower body mass indexes and prevalence of obesity compared to non-tokers. Folks, those are the facts that prove the inevitability of marijuana legalization has been reached. We are past the tipping point. There's no going back now. You can find all these stats and graphs at hightimes.com and radicalruss.com.
420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
Welcome back, everyone. Half past and time for us to visit with Dr. Mitch Earlywine, who's on the phone from Albany, New York. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a good day.
Hope you're staying warm and out of the snow. Is it still pretty bad out there?
We just had a good day, but it's supposed to start up again tonight, so we'll have to tough it out.
Okay, good luck to you. I mean, that's why I love living in Portland. It may have a lot of precipitation, but at least I don't have to shovel it.
Good point.
So, folks, get ready with your questions. If you want to ask Dr. Mitch anything on cannabis science, culture, history, or health, our chat room is ready, or you can dial in live at 971-533-7111. But as usual, we start off by giving Dr. Mitch the first word on what's the latest in cannabis science. Dr. Mitch?
We got another null result on cannabis use and depression. There's some more coverage of that marijuana and Alzheimer's stuff we talked about last time. An interesting study on marijuana reducing creativity, and yet another THC increases paranoia experiment.
What? THC increases paranoia? Who told you that? Is it someone who knows that I got THC? Oh, crap, I gotta go.
I think I just heard a siren.
Let's tackle that one, the THC and paranoia, because I've always maintained that part of what makes weed smokers paranoid is the fact that they're really out to get us. What is this study telling us?
Well, so in fact, they did randomly assign folks to either get THC or a placebo, and it was done here, and it was done in a lab that didn't sound like the most fun place in the world to be high. But in fact, the THC group did report more kind of suspicious sort of thoughts, but it was basically 50% in that group versus 30% in the other. So it's not the biggest effect ever in the universe. And I just want to emphasize that this was pure THC, and so this is yet another case where if you had the whole plant and it actually had some CBD in it, odds are high this would not be as dramatic an effect.
Oh, okay. So we're not talking about people smoking regular old joints with some CBD in them, but we're talking about, the pure THC, which, as we all know, is incredibly psychoactive.
Well, and in fact, it was injected. So
oh, my God.
Like suddenly you're totally high in just a few minutes rather than getting this kind of nice, understandable onset. So I think, the paranoia-inducing effects are real, but I don't think anybody needs to go to jail over it.
Okay. We got a question from Michael Daisy 9 in our chat room who wants to know if you think that having a bad lipid profile, for example, high LDL and low HDL, could affect how much THC enters the bloodstream and how fast. Any effect from cholesterol, HDL, LDL on marijuana absorption?
We haven't seen that directly. We have seen the because it's so lipid soluble, so fat soluble. That tends to mean you're going to test positive on a urine screen a lot longer, and so that's certainly a drawback. I hate to sound like an unbearable vegetarian, but that's often the path to decreasing that LDL and making that HDL a little more prominent.
So someone with a high bad cholesterol could likely test positive on a urine screen longer?
We've at least seen that with just regular body fat percentage, and that's often a good correlate of LDL. So what a surprise, if you're carrying around a few extra pounds, you're probably going to pee positive a couple extra weeks.
Would any of those statin drugs make any difference? The Crestors and Lipitors and stuff?
We just don't have the data. Pharmacologically, those don't usually end up helping you decrease total body fat, so it probably wouldn't have a big impact.
So it's more the body fat that's the issue. Cholesterol is just kind of also a co-indicator of high body fat.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's tackle the anxiety issue, because there was an interesting study I saw having to do with anxiety and natural cannabinoids. What can you tell us about that?
The bottom line on this is, what a surprise. The cannabinoid system is involved in worry and rumination and anxiety in general, and a lot of folks turn to cannabis as an anxiety treatment. But I do want to emphasize that there are good cognitive behavioral treatments that you can learn in as little as a few sessions, a whole lot of stuff online that you can do at home without even having to shell out a copay, and that sometimes the cannabis-related anxiety is really a strain-dependent issue. So again, if you have a little cannabidiol, if you go for those high CBD strains, you're much less likely to have an anxiety reaction to cannabis.
As physicians are now becoming more aware of cannabis and its uses, and we have more legal states where recommendations are possible, is there any agreement among them as far as high dose or low dose, high THC, low THC, or any guidelines that any of these physicians have come up with as far as recommending to their patients?
Only kind of informally, and some work in California is trying to help out with that, and I think it's a step in the right direction. But you have to sort of take on the topography of the smoker, if you will. Some people take those giant lung buster hits and hold them a long time, and it's really unnecessary. And this has been the complaint a lot of physicians have had about any kind of vaporized or inhaled drug, is it's really hard to control dosage unless you've got one of those sort of fancy things that literally will just squirt out a very specific amount. And a lot of folks don't seem to work too well with that. I think the big recommendation, though, is definitely use a vaporizer. Start out small, wait a good long while before you hit it a second time, and really go for relief of symptoms, not some kind of subjective effect or increase in euphoria.
Is there any effort made? I mean, I imagine people are working on this, but have we seen any results yet on trying to correspond, terpene profiles or any sort of strain profiles to match certain types of diseases? I mean, I've seen it informally with Leafly, and some dispensaries will say, well, this is good for that and this is good for that. But is there any science behind any of that?
I mean, the folks at WHAM were doing some wonderful work, literally just correlational stuff of who said this helps what. And we are starting to get a feel for at least which strain does what. When you start looking at the full range of the different terpenes, it gets pretty complicated pretty fast. So there are a whole lot of potentially interacting things that seem to work. And right now, if we could just focus on THC and CBD, I feel like we'd make a whole lot of progress. But as these data sets, get larger and larger, we're going to know more. In fact, a lot of the terpenes aren't psychoactive on their own, but they may contribute to how we metabolize or how THC functions. And so we've got a lot of research ahead of us, but it's all really interesting, and it's all really focused on helping people. So I can't understand why we can't get more federal funding.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, is it a possibility that we may never actually get to any sort of very standardized profiles, because we're talking about something that works on an individual's endocannabinoid system, which may be different for every individual? Is that a consideration?
Very much so, and in fact, we have idiographic reactions to just about every single drug. So, you'll see a lot of folks prescribing antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs and literally saying, give it a shot a couple of weeks and come back and tell me how it's working, and we'll make our decision from there. And we even do that with the statins. Here's something that's not psychoactive at all. You try one, it doesn't work, you move to the other one. This one's got weird side effects, try a third. It's just kind of an individualized experiment. They've been talking about since the Human Genome Project that we're going to have these specific drugs to each specific individual, but we're just not there yet.
I'm waiting for the marijuana that needs another form of marijuana to make it work better, like the antidepressants. Is your marijuana not getting
marijuana to undo the side effects of marijuana?
Yeah, exactly. We have a question from Herb Staley in the chat room. Wants to know, for pain, what it would be a better idea, a 1-to-1 THC CBD transdermal patch or just a straight CBD transdermal patch?
I have not seen particularly impressive data on CBD and pain, and this is my opinion, but that's generally how I feel about it. And the clincher on this is always you want a modest amount. High doses of THC do not help pain. They actually make it worse. And so the clincher may be you have to kind of, have the patch on. When things start feeling okay, go ahead and take it off and wait a little while, rather than trying to say, I'm going to have a steady state, I'm going to leave it here all at once. Really be mindful of how a moderate amount is really the way to go as far as pain control.
It sounds to me like, okay, so if THC at the moderate doses is going to help pain, but at a too high a dose is going to exacerbate pain, perhaps that's an argument for the lower dose marijuana, the lower THC percentage flowers or whatever, so that you would have a better chance to titrate that as you're using it.
I mean, either that or starting out with really small hits, really small vaporized doses. And what's funny is, you go to Colorado now, and I'm not sure what it's like in Washington State, but, to find something that's only 11% THC, which sounded pretty high to folks back in the 80s, is suddenly really tough. And I feel like these are kind of paralleling the proof wars where you got, the 151 rum or the, Everclear, stuff like that. We really don't need more THC as the answer to everything. And in fact, I feel like the low dose strains are really an advantage as far as a number of medical conditions, including pain control.
You know, that bringing up Colorado brings up a point. You know, Colorado's kind of got two parallel systems running to the point where they've got completely separate stock of medical versus recreational plants. Washington's looking at trying to merge the two systems, and Oregon is just beginning to think about what it does. Is there a strong argument for keeping medical systems of distribution and processing and cultivation separate from a recreational market? Perhaps because recreational is always going to have that proof war, like you mentioned.
I'm torn about this in part because there are also arguments for different taxation rates, and it seems just unfair to tax medicine in a way that is just prohibitive to use for people who actually really need it medically and don't have a lot of money. So that's one potential reason to kind of keep these separated. I know that the markets tend to bleed across each other, but also this tacit assumption that medical needs the high ones. You know, that the edibles that are 10 milligrams, those are the recreational ones, but the 35s are medical. That just I think sends a strange message to folks, when in fact THC is THC, and you can titrate your own dose. And I really want medical folks to have the opportunity to use as little as possible, in part so tolerance develops relatively slowly, if at all, and so you can have a dose that'll make sure you can go to sleep at night but not wake up a little groggy or a little high.
All right. Well, great information, Dr. Mitch. I know everyone in the chat room really appreciates your answers to the questions. And folks, if you didn't get a chance to get your question in, or you're just shy or want to keep it private, you can. You can send Dr. Mitch a personal email at 420research@gmail.com, and you don't have to have anyone else hear about what you're asking. Dr. Mitch, thanks again for joining us here every Monday on the Russ Belville Show. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, folks, stick around. When we come back, we have time for a radical rant, talking about the long road from legalization to equalization and what it is going to take. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Your brain is a marvel of technology. But when you take drugs, you alter your brain. You change thinking patterns. You distort perception. And eventually, your brain just won't be the same. Think about it while you still can.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel. a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, no. Immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. All right, welcome back, everybody. 45 after the hour, and today I want to talk about the long road from legalization to equalization. We've just legalized marijuana here in the state of Oregon and Alaska. We're 2 years into legalization in Colorado and Washington state, and people are thrilled to no longer be treated as criminals for their marijuana use. And I believe that severely understates our case. Yes, of course, like my friend Jody Emery in Canada once pointed out, if you're being whipped 7 days a week, you don't refuse to take weekends off if they're offered, right? So yeah, it'd be nice not to be whipped anytime, but if you can get a weekend off, you'd take it, right? And that's how I feel about us as cannabis consumers, is that we've been whipped 7 days a week, and legalization has finally given us the weekends off. But we have so far to go until we are treated as equals in this society. See, as the way I see it, it's not so much a question about whether a drug should be illegal. It's whether its users should be treated as equals. In this country, we have already set a very strong precedent that we have the right to get intoxicated. We have the right to mess up our perceptions. And I express that as a right because it's in our Constitution. Intoxicating is in our Constitution in the 21st Amendment. And, for that matter, the 18th that repealed it. But the 21st Amendment, by repealing the 18th, returned us back to a situation where it was assumed that Americans had the right to consume intoxicating liquors and spirits. We were a country founded by beer drinkers, cider drinkers, wine drinkers, and liquor drinkers. If you've ever seen the bar tab from the Constitutional Convention, you would know just what a set of lushes our founding fathers were. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Brilliant men, brilliant philosophies, kind of myopic and short-sighted based on their treatment of black people and so forth, but still the best constitution, the best democracy that could have been thought of back in the 18th century. So these men got intoxicated. They felt there was a right to be intoxicated, and our 21st Amendment reaffirmed that right to get intoxicated. But more so than looking at it as a legal perspective, I look at it as a cultural imperative. Our culture couldn't be more seeped in drugs if it tried. The oxymoron of a drug-free America has never been true, and to tell you the truth, most Americans wouldn't want it to be true. We love our drugs. We love our alcohol. We love our prescription pills. And to some extent, we even still love our tobacco. I should say we love our nicotine, so that we can include the nicotine gums and patches that go in that as well. So for me, it's not a question of how harmful alcohol is or how bad weed gets you messed up or whatever. It's a cultural and constitutional point that adults have the right to alter their perceptions through the use of substances. Now, we do have different regulations on that. We do have regulations to prevent, too much harm to society coming from individuals' use of substances. We don't let people drive drunk. We set a limit for that. We don't allow drunkenness to be an excuse for boorish behavior. We have laws against that. And to some extent, we even have
dry counties in this country that don't allow any alcohol sales at all. But for the most part, in America, you're allowed to be a drunk. You're allowed to be a raging alcoholic if you so choose. Now, if you drive drunk as an alcoholic, we'll put you in prison. If you beat your spouse as an alcoholic, we'll call the cops and throw you in the tank and put a restraining order against you. But the use of alcohol itself, even to a deleterious effect to the user, is something we accept as a right in a free society. You have the right to be an alcoholic bum. So for me, the real question is, why do we as pot smokers have any fewer rights than beer drinkers? Now, if we go back to the relative harm of both substances, cannabis and alcohol, to both user and society, we will find that in every respect, marijuana causes less harm. This is recognized by numerous polls where people will say that marijuana is safer than alcohol, or at very least, no more dangerous than alcohol. Even our president says marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol. So if that's the case, if we have two substances whose threat to individual and society are roughly equal or far less, then it makes no sense to treat the users of that substance with more restrictions than the users of the more dangerous substance. For instance, beer drinkers aren't limited to buying just one six-pack at the store. They're not limited in that they can only keep 2 cases of beer in their house. A beer drinker, if he or she so chooses, can go to, in my state, a grocery store. Some states a liquor store, but you can go and buy kegs, plural, of beer. I once threw a party where we had 10 kegs of beer. I was 22, 23 years old when I threw that party. Perfectly legal for me to go with a van and pick up 10 kegs of beer. Yet, they expect us marijuana smokers to be happy that we can now finally buy an ounce at a store, that we can now finally possess 8 ounces at home, in the case of Oregon. It's a good start, but it's nowhere near the equality that I'll settle for until you start telling me beer drinkers are limited to 6 packs and a couple of cases. There is no reason why an adult should be limited in how much marijuana they can purchase or possess. The only reason that even comes close to being legitimate is to prevent someone from stockpiling marijuana in a legal state so that they may distribute it in an illegal state. And that, to me, folks, is my rights as an Oregonian being punished and curtailed because Idaho can't get its shit together, or Nebraska, or Kansas, or whatever state it might go out to. Beer drinkers have plenty of places where they can publicly enjoy their beer, not just indoors, but they have beer gardens, beer festivals. You can, in a lot of cities, pack up a bottle of wine or a case of beer and take it to a park with you and enjoy it with your friends. So yes, I'm happy that I'm no longer treated as a criminal for smoking weed in my own home, but I will not be satisfied until I have the same rights a beer drinker has, until we have marijuana bars that I can go to and congregate with my friends, until I'm allowed to go and smoke pot in a public park in a specially designated area. We are not equals. Advertisement. Beer, oh my God. I would be hard pressed to make it through a day without seeing advertisement for beer in some respect. I can't walk down the streets for a block or two without seeing an advertisement for a bar. Oftentimes a bar that'll have like a little neon cocktail glass as its logo, or a frosty mug, a Suds, as its logo. Perfectly okay to not only advertise beer, but to promote it with symbology of beer. But marijuana? We can't have advertisement for marijuana? The pot shops can't show a pot leaf? Again, I'm at least happy that we finally get to some pot marketplaces. But we're forcing pot marketplaces to be more restricted in their advertising, more restricted in their marketing, in their, outside of their store promotions, their signage, more restricted than not only a tavern or a bar, but a freaking strip club or a porno shop has more advertising rights than a marijuana shop does. So it's great that we've been legalized to have our pot shops, but until we're equal in our abilities to advertise, market, and promote, we haven't gone far enough. As a beer drinker, there's very little chance that my use of beer, even my alcoholic binge drinking dysfunctional use of beer, is going to cost me a shot at employment. Very few employers are drug testing for alcohol, and even if they did, it flushes from your system so quickly it wouldn't even be worth testing. Now, if I show up to work drunk, yeah, they can fire me. But for the most part, as long as my drinking doesn't affect my work, my drinking is not going to affect my employment. But with marijuana smokers, as we all know, we can be discriminated against before they even offer us a job. Washington, D.C. made headlines this week for passing a bill that says that they can't drug test you for pot until they've offered you a conditional offer of employment. So they're even just saying, look, you can not hire people if they're potheads, but you first have to offer them the job. That's it. That's the small step we've made. It's still okay to discriminate against us, but you have to offer them a job first. At least that's better than not even getting through to the having my resume scanned portion of the contest because my pee comes up dirty or my armpit hair has metabolites in it. Drinking beer, by and large, is not going to cost you your child custody. If you're a divorced parent, an adoptive parent, you're not going to have any problem with the state or your ex if you're a beer drinker. Now, if you're an alcoholic, perhaps, if your behavior through your drinking of alcohol has been shown to be dysfunctional and harming that child, yeah, you might lose your child custody. But the mere fact that you like to drink a beer at the end of the day after a long day work is not enough to take your kid from you. But with marijuana, in almost every state it is. Just the mere fact that you have marijuana in the house can get your kids taken from you. So yes, it's nice that we're legalized and not taken away from our children by cops. But until we're equalized and not having our children taken away by CPS, there's still a long way to go. And for my friends, and I have a few, who need organ transplants or who have had organ transplants, their use of alcohol, by and large, does not discriminate against their ability to get an organ transplant. Now, there are some little sticking points there. If you're looking for a liver transplant and you're a full-blown alcoholic, you're not going to get your liver transplant. They will evaluate your alcohol use to see if it's dysfunctional enough to possibly cost you that organ. But the mere use of a beer, drinking a beer with dinner or a margarita with dinner, is not enough to deny your organ transplant. But merely mention that you smoke pot to most organ transplant clinics, even in a legal medical marijuana state, even when you have your doctor's recommendation to do so, that can get you kicked off the list. And they won't let you back on the list until you stop using marijuana for 6 months, 60 days, depends on the clinic, and you can pass one of their piss tests. This directly killed a man named Tim Guerin in 2008 when I first started my job as a marijuana journalist. I had to learn how this Seattle musician lost his chance at a replacement liver and died because he was using medical marijuana because his doctor said it would be the best pain reliever because it doesn't kill your liver. So yes, it's nice that we've got marijuana legalization. That's not the end of the journey, folks. It's just the first step. It's time for us to start marching toward equalization and let that be our new buzzword. All right, folks, that's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. I got to talk a little bit about college football. You know that's coming up. Plus, we got some other stories to talk about in the hopper. So stay tuned. More marijuana discussions coming up on Toker Talk Radio. For everyone here at 420 Radio, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it,